I've been considering diving into learning code. I know the basics of HTML and CSS and nothing more. Would you suggest someone like me dive into app development or start with something like web applications? Kalen.
That's a great question.
And if anybody else wants to dive in, please do. I'm assuming Kalen's going to have the most to say.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of different ways to approach this question, and we've had it multiple times. I think that you kind of have to look at it from a few different perspectives. If you're looking at it from a career perspective and what you want to do, where you want to be in a year or 2 years, if you want to be a developer, I think there's a couple things to consider. One is the web development spectrum is very broad. What you're going to learn in web development is applicable almost anywhere, right? You go to any shop, any company in the Valley, and they all use web development in some way, shape, or form. There's pros and there's cons to that, right? One pro is that everybody uses it. One con is that there's lots of different things that you could specialize in. If you choose the wrong specialty, maybe it's harder to find a position as opposed to something else that the shop down the road needs. The opposite, I guess another part of that is that since it's broader, there are a lot more people in that industry, right? So you may be competing with people from lots of different backgrounds for the same job, and you may have to find different ways to differentiate yourself. iOS development or app development, on the other hand, is a little bit more defined. It's a little bit, more narrow in its focus, right? It's one platform, one language, kind of, Objective-C versus Swift, but it's one, ecosystem as opposed to web, right? So you're specializing, and it's more narrow. And again, there's pros and cons to that. So there are lots of companies looking specifically for iOS developers, and that's great because if you're an iOS developer, you by definition should apply for that job. But it also means that if there's a company that doesn't do any iOS development, then they probably don't have a position for you. So that kind of specialization goes both ways. It also translates into salary. Because, as I told you, the web development is more broad. There's more people in that market. There are fewer iOS developers. So generally speaking, the salary for iOS developers is on average higher than a typical web developer because there are fewer. The demand is it's more pronounced because there are fewer app developers. So I think you got to consider that. If you're doing it for a startup, you just got to look at your business and say, okay, what's more important? Mobile first? Do I need it? Are my users going to be using this in a browser, traditional browser, or app type of thing?
So what about right now? So if you had a son who's or a daughter who's coming up and she had gotten, where would you guide her if she was right here in Provo? And she was like, Dad, tell me which path to take.
Yeah, I would say, well, what do you like to do most, right? If she's on the phone all the time and she wants to build something on the phone, then I'd say do that, right? But if she wants to build something in the browser that she wants to do on the traditional laptop, then I say, go for it. It really just, where do you want to be? I think it's like languages, right? Once you learn a language, kind of transferring those skills over to another language is not crazy hard. In fact, we've had multiple students that have done web development and then gone to iOS development. They do quite well, actually. But it just is all, where do you want to start and how deep do you want to go?